Morning, everyone in this virtual world out there. Thank you for joining us over the next 90 minutes for a very timely debate, I think. As you know, the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is today in Belgrade and in Skopje, and probably the timing couldn't be better for us to discuss Western Balkans US relations within the context of European integration and, of course, geopolitics. Now, what are we going to do today? We will hear some very interesting input from people in the capitals, from the Western Balkans and beyond. And there is also, as you know, a chat button on your screen, which I would like you to use as much as you want. Send me your messages, comments, and questions, and I will include them in the discussion, because we want to have interaction, and the more opinions and questions we have from your side, the better. Now, maybe just as a way of introduction, okay? First of all, thank you, TEPSA, for setting us all up. It's great. A special thanks to Allegra. And the second thing I want to say is that when we talk about Western Balkans and US relations in this European context, of course, we want to see what the impact, and we want to discuss what the impact of the United States was and is on the countries in the Western Balkans, and how does this relate actually to EU enlargement, democratization, and state building, modernization, and stability, because this goes hand in hand with our European integration objectives. Of course, the second point we're going to look into is also the role of geopolitics, which is very dynamic and evolving, and which was different in the past than it is now. And then the credibility of relations, I think, is also very crucial, because these relations are vivid and they change, and they are, of course, on a bilateral basis, but also in the EU context. This is what we're going to talk about. And the basis for our discussion is, of course, this book here. I hope you can see it. The United States and the Future of Europe, Views from the Capitals. This is the book which we published before the summer, in April, actually. It's all the people which I'm going to introduce to you now, all the speakers, are actually also authors in this book. It is a book which is published by Springer. I am one of the, I'm privileged to be one of the editors. It is actually set up in the framework of TEPSA, and it is very interesting. It has more than 42 contributions from 42 analysts from 42 European capitals on the United States and the future of Europe, and how their respective capital and their respective country sees actually the relations with the United States and the impact that US politics has had, has, and will have on their political situation. The book is actually a very nice travel guide, political travel guide through the diversity of the European landscape, and so it puts together, of course, the 27 EU member states, but it goes beyond. It has views from the candidate countries and the neighboring countries, those countries that are not candidate at this point in time. And it shows you, I mean, it was finished at the end of 2024, published in April this year. And of course, a lot of things are happening, but it shows you very much the different viewpoints and at the different starting points of the countries. History, geography, culture play a big role here. It makes a lot of difference whether you are in Reykjavik, in Istanbul, in Belgrade, in Kiev, in Brussels, in London, in Madrid. And this book allows you just to have a quick view on what the different people think their relations actually are. And one of the main findings, in fact, is that many of the countries think that they have a very unique relationship and that they can act as a bridge builder. But the question is this reciprocal? Would the United States agree to that? And would it not be better to pool our strength and use our leverage and then make a difference as a European family? No? And then you have a lot of reality checks in the chapters. There have always been stable and historical good relations with many of the European countries, but these things are changing actually. So the main objective is keep the US somehow engaged as much as possible on the one hand, now on the other hand, become more independent from the US and reduce dependency from different global powers. So that's a little bit as a teaser for this book here. If you want to take a look, you will find it in good bookshops online or in your university libraries. But coming back to our discussion, perfect line of speakers, which we have today. We will start with Irena Pandeva. Irena is a full professor of political science at the Methodius University in Skopje, North Macedonia. And if I read correctly, Ursula von der Leyen will be in Skopje this afternoon. She is currently also the head of the Institute for Political Science, Media and Communications, which is good because she combines all the different features which we actually will be touching upon in our discussion here. Now, we also have the pleasure to listen to Sava Mitrovic. Hi, Sava. Sava is a researcher at the Faculty of Political Science, University of Belgrade. Ursula von der Leyen will be there meeting with the government. He's also a researcher, which is very interesting, at the European Policy Center. Remember, European Policy Center had a strong advocacy of the model of stage accession to the EU. Now, and then we have the privilege to have Daniela with us, Daniela Jacimovic. She is a full professor of the Faculty of Economics at the University of Montenegro. I think Ursula von der Leyen already visited Montenegro in this tour. I hope she had coffee with you. You will tell us about it. Daniela is also a board member of TEPSA. And then, of course, we have our friend Voje Butkovic from Zagreb. Hello, Voje. He works at the Institute for Development and International Relations at IRMO, Zagreb, Croatia. He's a scientific advisor at the Department of European Policies. And my name is Paul Schmidt from the Austrian Society for European Politics. I'm connected from Vienna. So this is the setup which we have. And what we decided together was that each of the four is going to give a 10-minute input on their article and chapter in our book, already connecting it to what we see on the ground at this moment. And then we take the discussion from there. I think after each input, I will ask one or two questions, and I will ask all the participants to join me in asking questions or giving comments yourself. Having said this, I would like to hand the microphone over to Irena. Irena, Skopje, Vienna calling to Skopje. Skopje has the floor. We very much look forward to your input. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Paul, and thank you to TEPSA and all of the participants. And of course, thank you for the initiative, as always. I would like to start by noting that North Macedonia and the US have good bilateral relations, which are based on and dominated by politics and diplomacy. Speaking from a broader perspective, I can say that the relations include cooperation in a number or let's say all important areas, and encompass collaboration in social, economic, cultural, educational, and military issues, or at least in some more than in the others. This year, we marked the 30th anniversary of bilateral relations, and the US stated that it will continue to give full support for North Macedonia's aspirations and strategic choices, as it has done since the country gained independence. Now, the US recognized North Macedonia in 1994 under the country's provisional name at the time, which was former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, while the embassy opened in 1996. And the US recognition of the country under our constitutional name at the time, Republic of Macedonia, was done in 2004. And even though this recognition was a decade or so later, it was highly welcomed and appreciated because it was the US that pushed Macedonian membership to NATO the hardest, as it was done even before, but most particularly during the Bucharest NATO summit in 2008. And after the grand failure to secure this, the US opted for signing of a declaration of strategic partnership and cooperation between the two countries. Now, the act itself, but also the document, laid path for engaging and expanding cooperation, as well as promotion of strategic dimension, which included intensified cooperation and consultation on things such as security, people-to-people ties, and commerce, but it also exhibited the US dedication to North Macedonia in terms of strategy, stability, and security. As you all already know, the triangle composed of US, EU, and some EU member states has proven to be essential and is recognized as the so-called third party when a crisis seems to be looming in the Macedonian political milieu. This was done so in a number of historic occasions, starting from the 2001 conflict and reaching the Ohrid Framework Agreement, then the 2016 crisis and the Pershino Agreement, the signing of the Good Neighborly Relations Treaty with Bulgaria, and the Prespa Agreement in 2018 to overcome the name dispute, and finally the accession of North Macedonia to NATO in 2020. Now, regarding Macedonian aspirations, we have to underline that the American backing was always present and critical, whether it was related to our country aspirations to join the European Union or NATO. On bilateral level, the ties seems to have enhanced after 2001, which was a critical year for both countries, with events happening in both countries. And I would say since the latest change of government, which happened in both countries. Now, though the number of official visits and meetings may not be extensive compared to other countries, the actual list of occasions to which Macedonian government officials were invited and attended on various stances in the US is rather large. Our Prime Minister traveled to the US on at least 2 occasions, as well as our Minister of Foreign Affairs, including one bilateral meeting with the US Secretary of State. Our President was also active, and this is all just in 2025, which is still much more than what we have witnessed before. The bilateral cooperation in security also seems to be enhanced in 2025, since our Minister of Defense stated, and this is a quote, "America is the only country that actually supports us to the maximum and fullest extent." End of quote. According to the reports, this statement was done to mark the occasion of signing of 6 new agreements related to military and security, Those agreements amount to about 20 million of euros. It was done in 2025 again. And the money is coming from American funds, and it will be used for buying the newest military equipment. They're talking about drones more precisely. Now, if we take into consideration the public stance on the US, I would say that the polls continue to show that the US is still considered as very important and influential partner of Macedonia, but we are talking mostly in terms of politics, security, and stability, which is why my title in the book is related to politics and diplomacy in terms of bilateral relations. The situation with our economic cooperation is regrettably not following that pattern. And although there are some developments in terms of trade exchange and investments, the situation may and should improve. How can this be achieved amidst the newly implemented tariff system? I cannot say, but it is part of my recommendations in bettering relations beyond politics and diplomacy. In relation to the visible and outspoken pro-Trump stance by the current Macedonian government, there are, of course, some voices marking it as a sharp turn. But if I were to label what is happening in regards to Macedonian foreign policy course, not disputing the actual support by Macedonian officials for Trump, I would not use the word shift, but most probably adjustment. And adjustment in terms of what is necessary, what is the reality, and what is considered as best in this given time for the country, of course. I would say that North Macedonia's foreign policy course is a course of a small country aspiring to be part of the EU and fully aligned with NATO. And this course is more or less reactive and often projected as if it is compelled to respond to outside incentives, whatever they may be. The fact that there is some alteration in terms of the focus, especially in regard to the frozen stance of our European integration and aiming to improve cooperation with the US on political and diplomatic level, is evident. On the US part, I would say that the Trump administration shows little or no interest for North Macedonia, which is more or less typical for the region as well. However, let's not forget that our Prime Minister was one of the few European leaders invited for the Trump's inauguration ceremony. And while in the US, he addressed the annual event of the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington, where he was one of 3 European leaders to do so. This is by no account a testament for a shift in terms of bettering US policy towards Macedonia, but it is a legitimate indication that the conservative bond and partnership is present. Now, whether and how will this translate into an official American policy, we just have to wait and see. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Irina. A very, very interesting input. Of course, the key question for me would be, at the end of your presentation, you said there's little or no interest in North Macedonia from the US. How do you make sure that nevertheless North Macedonia is heard? That would be one question. And the second question is, what about the 5% goals on NATO military spending? Is that something that the official position of North Macedonia shares and supports? And my third question already, because this is so interesting, where is North Macedonia on this tariff negotiations with the US? Did the EU somehow, when Ursula von der Leyen went to Scotland, include Western Balkan countries in this basket, or are you completely out of this?
Okay, let me start by the third one because I remembered it best. It was on the tariffs.
Yeah.
Okay. When the US protectionist policy affected the whole world, it of course affected North Macedonia. So the immediate reaction on our account was that we should do something, and our government actually proposed signing of a new trade agreement, which didn't go through. So the initial response was in April, the Trump administration imposed a 33% tariff on North Macedonia, which affected most of the direct investment they had in North Macedonia, by the way. And then our government proposed a new law lowering the tariffs to, I think, 15%. And the story ended at some point in August when the Trump administration lowered the tariffs for us as well. This is one of the examples of being reactive instead of being active on our part. The second thing you mentioned was the raise of the
5%
GDP
goal, yes.
spending target. Um, of course, it is something that it will be discussed further on how to achieve it. But on our part, even the Prime Minister himself said, and in Washington, he actually said that the 2% is actually the floor. So we need to go up, and we are in full support of this. My problem in understanding this, I'm not an economist, maybe Daniela can help out here. How do we achieve this? Because it is only this year that we reached that mark of 2. We usually went below that. Now, on the first question regarding the interest of Trump administration on Macedonia, I would say that the second term of the Trump administration is not many different from what they did during the first term. I mean, we were seen as a low priority, and we will continue probably to be seen as a low priority. It will only happen that we are on the table in case of something horrific happens in the region, which may, of course, happen. Whether these contacts that I mentioned come up to be critical, I don't know. Because when I'm saying that we need to judge the number of high-level meetings, regardless of whether they were arranged as bilateral or they happened on a side of an event, the size of them, the amount of them is much bigger than what we had before. If you follow the news within our country and even beyond, you would see that they are happening, and I think that our government is counting on that. Now, in my text, I related U.S. engagement in the region related to the resolvement of Russia-Ukraine war, on how it will affect the regional security, how the relations between us and the EU continue. Now, of course, this is all valid. However, I must point out that American involvement, among others, in our country and probably in the region is crucial. And by saying that, I'm actually leveraging out the positive role they may have in finding solutions, not just because they want to, but because they have a responsibility and they are in a position to do so.
Thank you very much, Irena. Actually, the input reminds me of a quote by Ivan Kraschev. And it holds true for all the European countries. Doesn't matter if you're an EU member or a candidate country or a neighboring country. When he said on geopolitics that you either sit at the table or you are on the menu.
On the table.
You sit at the table or you are on the menu.
On the menu.
I think it's very much to the point. Over to you, Daniela. What is your perspective from Montenegro?
Okay, thank you very much. So, thank you for for inviting me to this panel. And it is my pleasure to be here today, but as the only economist in charge today, I will try to look to the future, to try to predict. That's actually my job in my everyday life. So this is a really pleasure to be here today, Paul, and to discuss Western Balkans, especially Montenegro, in this evolving dynamic with relation with the US in this new era. As my young colleague Jenny and I wrote in the opening line of our chapter, the modern history of relation between Montenegro and the United States is best illustrated by the journey from being NATO bombing target in 90s up to becoming NATO member in 2017. I just want to stress out that this one sentence captures transformation of entire country and in many ways of the region itself. Since declaring independence in 2006, Montenegro has strongly turned westward. So country began its EU negotiation in 2012 and as I said, we joined NATO in 2017. When we are talking about economic ties with the United States, of course, they are very, very modest because we are talking about economic ties among one of the smallest countries in the region and one of the biggest in the world. And Montenegro is a service-oriented country. But relations, as well as with, like in Macedonia, among these countries are more like political, very strong relationships and security that actually dominate in this relationship. From Montenegro's perspective, relations with the US are strong, granted of friendship, mutual respect, and shared commitment with NATO. If I turn to 2006, I would just like to say that US really was strongly present in Montenegro and from 2000 to 2006 helped strongly to Montenegro to develop all its institutions. I was the part of that project happily and worked for 6 years on that project together with IMF and World Bank experts to build central bank and other institutions in Montenegro. So, the United States, in turn, sees democratic Euro-Atlantic Montenegro as a cornerstone of regional stability, partner capable of contributing both security and prosperity. The first Trump administration highlighted Montenegro's strategic relevance. In 2017, President Trump signed Montenegro's National Accession Protocol. Either it was prepared by Republicans before him. Of course, in the same time, senior US officials visited Podgorica. So it was a clear signal of recognition and respect that even small countries matter in this global equation. In the same time, unpredictable nature of US foreign policy underlined importance of resilience, adaptability, and strategic planning of its partners. So we wrote in the chapter, a second Trump term could speed up everything. And indeed, it has. The changes introduced by the first Trump administration marked a clear turning point. His policies today go further and have exposed the vulnerabilities of countries closely tied to US in economic, security, and other areas. As someone who has observed this dynamic closely, I can say that for years the Balkans, Montenegro, and the EU relied heavily on the United States to address the region's most serious crisis. For example, in the 90s, it was the US who stepped in first in the region, while the EU hesitated, even though it was the conflict on the EU borders. But today I will say that landscape is changing. How I see it that these shifts have created unique moment for smaller states to rethink their strategies to build resilience and strengthen regional cooperation. In the same time, I see that Europe now has both opportunity and responsibility to act more decisively on its neighborhood. The EU task in the Western Balkans is easier than, for example, in Ukraine or in other countries of Eastern Partnership. The region does not include major powers like Russia. There is no power or states with nuclear arsenal or dominant energy resources. So, how I see it, Western Balkan is a region where the EU can truly test its role as a global actor and demonstrate what it can be that EU can be successful as a global actor. If the EU cannot solve problems here in its neighborhood, how can it expect to play global leadership role? EU must therefore take responsibility for Western Balkans finally, and this is exactly what current EU administration expects from my view. Small countries in the region, including Montenegro, have a vital role to play in this new phase too. The conflicts of 2000 taught Montenegro and others critical lesson. Small states must maintain good relations with all major powers, with the EU, with Russia, with the United States, China, Turkey, Emirates. Diplomacy, pragmatism, and balance are not optional. They are essential and for survival and stability. Today, I could say that Montenegro follows fully that principle, cultivating strong and strategic and constructive ties, not only with European and Euro-Atlantic partners, but also carefully managing relations with other regional and other global actors. This could serve a lesson for the region and for the European by itself, be self-sufficient, but yet cooperate with others. Moreover, Montenegro, as one of the most advanced EU candidates, illustrates both challenges and opportunities of this new era. Its membership is crucial not only for EU credibility, but also for stability of the Western Balkans. But membership is not guaranteed. Montenegro must continue reforms, raise political culture, and demonstrate unity across political and social lines. Of course, only strong domestic leadership in the country can fully benefit from EU support and help anchor regional stability. Globally, this moment calls for the balance, maintaining productive ties with the United States while building greater independence, not over-dependence, and strategic autonomy in Europe, meaning in the EU and the Western Balkans. Promoting flexibility, fostering regional cooperation, and developing complementary systems, small states can become valuable contributors to broader economic and security frameworks. This includes attracting investment, creating jobs, and building resilient trade and security network that would reduce overdependence of any single external actor. This is the moment, my colleagues, when we are witnessing an unprecedented moment of opportunity. The European Union must take responsibility. Montenegro must continue its reforms. The both must navigate complex relationship with the United States, balancing engagement with independence, cooperation with strategic autonomy. At the end, I don't know about you, but I find this moment deeply exciting. Things need to be fixed on the ways that have never been done before. These are opportunities. We don't have much time, but we have chance to do things differently. We have opportunity to fix system right once and for all. And I'm closing my statement from Montenegro. And about coffee, about von der Leyen, we can discuss later.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Daniela. Let me repeat to the audience, if you want to ask a question, there's this Q&A button at the lower part of your screen. Just use it and send us your comments, please. Daniela, on your input, may I ask two quick follow-up questions? One is, I don't know if I understood you correctly. I think you have said at one point that small states need to have good relations with the major geopolitical players. And would you say that Montenegro needs to have good relations with Russia? And how is that even possible in the situation in which we are?
Well, that's something that I am drafting and that we are actually writing here in my small Montenegro's team. You know, this is our approach as a small country. Of course, how to say, that's how we see it. It's very hard to have right now good relation with Russia, but as I said, it has to be carefully managed. From our history, we have learned that it is, as a small country, you are always, how to say, you follow the foreign policy, but you always have to be careful and try to carefully manage its own interests. When we are, for the history, has been very, very tight with Russia. There are a lot of historical and cultural relations. And we can't delete it at once. Of course, Montenegro supports European foreign policy, and Montenegrians strongly wants to be part of the European Union. And we will do everything what is needed to be potentially first member states. But it doesn't mean that we should send and that we are in position to send very strong messages. We should leave it to the strong forces like the European Union, like Germany, like the France. That's the position of Montenegro, because we have a long history of the conflicts and the wars. That's how I see it, and I think most of the population in Montenegro.
But there's a clear stance in support for Ukraine, I imagine.
Of course, of course, of course.
A second follow-up question. There's always talk about the need to speed up the enlargement process because of the geopolitical interference in the Western Balkans and the region. Is this geopolitical element exaggerated, or is it today, are those developments today more crucial and important than ever?
I think that thank you for both your questions. They are really good questions, and they are all both interconnected. So it's second question, yes, geopolitics has been always important, and now it's even more, because it's not that we are now dealing with one or two parties. We are dealing now with 6, 7 global players in the Western Balkans, and they all want to take the piece of the cake. And we try to balance them and try to mark our way to the European Union. And of course, since we have learned our geopolitical lessons from the 90s, now that's why we are trying to be soft, balancing all these forces. But of course, we want to have the as I also said, it's a time to do things on different ways. And why I said the European Union should take the responsibility, I just want to send that all these policies, or maybe they're not, or they were so soft policies that came from EU to the Western Balkans so far, they haven't produced so much positive effect. So we are still complaining about democracy, about rule of law, and what we have done all together for 3 decades or even more. So things has to be done differently. Something that maybe worked for Central East European countries doesn't work for the Western Balkans. And that's how I see that we all should use this momentum and change ourselves, taking in consideration very, very, very importance of geopolitical moment, which is even more harder than ever, and finally close this European story of the Western Balkans, or fairy tale, if you want, just make it story with the point at the end. And
happy end.
Yes, happy end, of course. We don't want any other than happy end. We have experienced so many ends, and I think that's time really for proactive, positive resolution for the Western Balkans.
Well, thank you very much, Daniela. Over to you, Sava. I mean, of course, I imagine the perspective, the Serbian perspective, with its experience, quite a long story of ups and downs, and a long time more downs than ups on transatlantic relations. The story is very different. The perspective is very different. So I'd like to bring you in here, Sava. The floor is yours. How do you view the transatlantic relations? What impact do they have nowadays? And how does this go together with the European context in which we move?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and I would also like to thank colleagues from TEPSA for having me here today. And yeah, Serbia has a very rich experience with relations to the United States. It's almost 150 years of diplomatic relations, and these relations truly have gone through various phases. But I think that from historical perspective, nobody can deny that Serbia and United States were usually on the same side of the history, and their alliances in two world wars are something that present actually the best part of their history, in particular World War I and relations that Thomas Woodrow Wilson had with Kingdom of Serbia and the support for the creation of Kingdom of Yugoslavia. Speaking of Yugoslavia, also Yugoslavian and American relations were usually on a high note. Coming to 1990s, that was the moment when things started to change. Although United States supported Yugoslavia remaining as whole, but in the moment when the war started, United States started to support independence of former Yugoslavian republics, and the perception that U.S. played a negative or anti-Serbian role in the 90s, which actually finished with NATO bombing in 1999, and NATO military campaign in Serbia and Montenegro, that still burdens their relations. I also think that have impact even on Montenegrin society, though the bombing was directed more towards Serbia and Belgrade as its capital and against autocratic regime of Slobodan Milosevic. But that scar exists, I think, in both societies. Just to have a little to make a comparison. U.S. then played a very important role in democratic changes in Serbia in 2000. And support for democratic transition that happened in that moment, and that was actually the phase of growth in Serbian-American relations and the rise of American both political and economic presence. U.S. in that moment became the biggest investor in Serbia, with some real growth companies coming to Serbia, such as U.S. Steel or in tobacco industry. We still have Philip Morris and British American Tobacco operating in Serbia. But in the last decade, the American economic presence, I would say also political influence, but to less extent than economic presence, has been diminishing. That's obvious, and being largely overshadowed by both the EU, which is not new, but China as well. In 2024, I checked the last stats. Foreign direct investments from the USA amounted to 150 million or something, and they're tripled compared to 2023. But they still lags far behind the investments coming from the EU or China, which are approximately, I think, from EU 2 billion, from China 1.7 billion, respectively. So in the last 3 or 4 years, China's direct investments are above 1 billion. So we are talking about 10 times or even 15 times bigger foreign direct investments compared to United States of America. On economic in economic domain, I would also like to highlight the latest things that are going on. In September 2024, Serbia's foreign minister, together with the U.S. Secretary for Environment and Energy, signed the agreement on strategic cooperation in energy. As U.S. State Secretary Secretary for Energy explained, the aim of that strategic agreement was to expand opportunities for U.S. companies to invest more in Serbia's energy sector, in particular projects related to renewables and clean energy. And Marko Đurić, Serbia's foreign minister, explained that that agreement was actually one step, that Serbia is moving one step closer to a strategic partnership and long-term good relations with US. Regarding trade, in 2024, the total trade volume was around 2.3 billion. We are witnessing in the past 5 years a slight growth in trade between US and Serbia, but still it's much less than Serbia's trade with EU, China, or even partners from the region, such as Bosnia and Herzegovina or other CEFTA partners. By Serbia's count, it ran a small trade deficit with the US. However, on the other hand, US data claims the opposite. And that was the reason for Trump's administration to impose a 35% tariff on Serbian goods. And for the audience, that was the biggest tariffs faced by one Southeast Europe country. I think the second biggest in Europe after Switzerland, and the top 10 in the world, definitely. I think Brazil is on 50%. South Africa is maybe also around 30. India, China even has less tariffs imposed by Trump's administration than Serbia. So it's a major issue for Serbian companies exporting to U.S. market. I mean, I talked to some of them. They are saying that practically the tariffs made their export impossible. And they're thinking about relocating their production from Serbia to maybe other countries from the region to avoid these tariffs. They're practically perceived as sanctions, but true sanctions came several months after, on the 5th of October. So last week, the USA officially actually imposed sanctions on the petroleum industry of Serbia. Of course, due to its majority Russian ownership, the sanctions, at least publicly explained, they were not. They didn't have the goal to target Serbia, but to target Russian Gazprom and the energy industry of Russia. Serbia, on the other hand, didn't try to retake the control, to regain the control of shares of its petroleum industry that was sold in 2008 to Russia's Gazprom. As president of Serbia claimed, we don't want to take that hostile act, as he explained, to Russians. We will talk to Russians about everything, because now we have nothing to talk about to Americans. They have forced their way out. That was practically what Vučić said. I think it's almost a quote. Regarding political relations, they are always very connected and can't be separated from economic. The US is labeled as one of the 4 pillars of Serbia's so-called multi-vector foreign policy. That 4 pillars for foreign policy was actually established in officially in 2008, but it was the case even during the early 2000s. Maybe it was more 3 pillars when China showed up as one global player and joined those scope of Serbia's foreign policy pillars. On that note, in August 2025, so 2 months ago, Serbia's foreign minister met U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and they discussed launching the U.S.-Serbia strategic dialogue. Though formalization of bilateral relations between Serbia and USA still lacks, I mean that there is no comprehensive strategic partnership. There is a now strategic partnership in energy sector, but nothing like a comprehensive partnership like the one that exists with China or Russia or even other European partners such as France or Italy and Arab countries. Even Egypt has a strategic partnership with Serbia. So Serbia has, I think, more than 10 strategic partnership. Greece is also there, but USA are not, although they are one of the four pillars. And now Serbia initiating that strategic dialogue with the USA with the final aim to reach a strategic partnership agreement with Serbia and to formalize their relation. But the major disagreements still originate from different positions on Kosovo's status, as it's widely known. USA recognized Kosovo's independence. It's supported the statehood building processes in Kosovo, and that's the reason why Serbia. That's the main reason, from my perspective, why Serbia still preserves relations with Moscow. Moscow as the biggest Serbian ally when it comes to Kosovo issue, the country that did not recognize Kosovo's independence and actually prevent Kosovo from joining UN and specialized institution within UN system. That's why Serbia still hesitates to introduce sanctions on Russia. Well, when it comes to security relations, it's important to highlight that Serbia is Serbia joined Partnership for Peace, so Serbia cooperates with NATO also through signing first and then second individual partnership action plan with NATO, which is the one mechanism, I would say that the highest mechanism of NATO's cooperation with non-member states, but unlike other countries from regions and countries from which my colleagues are coming, Croatia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Serbia, preserves its military neutral status and that doesn't have a strategic goal of joining NATO. When it comes to EU, the story is different. That's officially Serbia's foreign policy priority. But a few more words about Serbia's U.S. military relations. Important thing also to highlight here and how U.S. presence in defense sector is important for Serbia. So despite official moratorium that exists in Serbia on international military exercises, which was explained by preserving military neutral position in the time of geopolitical clashing, despite of that moratorium, which was never lifted, and it was introduced 5 years ago, Serbia still co-organized one military exercise with U.S. European Command. It's called Platinum Wolf, and that's the only exemption from that moratorium. And to conclude, I would like to say a few words about public opinion and citizen perception on the U.S. Role in Serbia. So I would definitely say that the Serbs are highly influenced, and their perception of the USA is highly influenced by recent historical events, starting from US role in Yugoslavia's breakup, the NATO bombing, and Kosovo's secession and support that US is provided for that. But it's also largely shaped with anti-American narratives in Serbian tabloids and TV stations with national frequencies. Here I have one study on media reporting conducted by my colleagues from TEPSA, Center for Research, Transparency and Accountability. It's maybe the most influenced NGO in media field in Serbia, and they revealed that in the context of the war in Ukraine, TVs with national frequencies reported negatively about the US in 36% of cases, with only 2% of reports being positive. And usually in Serbia's media, US is portrayed as a proponent of pressure and actors aiming to impose their will on Serbia. In that regard, my colleagues, those data actually matches with those that were part of research conducted by my colleagues from Faculty of Political Science, and their results show that 39% of Serbian citizens considered the US to be enemy of Serbia. Only 16% perceive it as a friend. But nevertheless, the importance of cooperating with the US for Serbia's national interest is also recognized by, I think, something like 60% of Serbian citizens still recognize why the US is important and that Serbia needs to cultivate relations with US.
Well, thank you very much, Sava. I think what you have said is very interesting, and it also answers one of the questions which we had in the Q&A channel on whether everyone is pro-US and pro-EU, something which is not at all the case in Serbia. And I think it's particularly interesting that this ambivalence, of course, the public opinion is very much determined by the way politics and media, which is not all free, as we know, talk about U.S. Serbian relations. But still, this ambivalence that on the one hand, 39% perceive the U.S. as an enemy, on the other hand, a high number of people also would agree that cooperation is very, very important. This is actually sounds like a contradiction. It must not be a contradiction, but it is the impact of the way I think that the media reports and about the U.S. Now, two things I found very interesting. On the one hand, I remember that quote, and I would quote you in the future, that on the issue of trade tariffs with the US, Serbia is the Switzerland, the Western Balkans. I mean, this is just impossible how to deal with this. And that the Kosovo is actually, the Kosovo issue, the Russian relations are actually used as a leverage.
Absolutely.
In the Kosovo negotiations. And at the same time, you have strategic partnership talks with the US. So there's sounds like a contradiction. My question would be, what is the role of the US? I mean, two questions. First, is there a role of the US in support of the students on the street demonstrating against state capture and state corruption? And my second question would be, I mean, Trump and his leadership and Trump as a leader and his personality, is it viewed differently than the US as a country in the data which you have seen?
Yeah, on your first question about America's support for student demonstrations, from my perspective, U.S. Was highly ignoring what is going on Serbia's streets, at least in public sphere. Unlike some EU's representatives, in particular European Parliament and their members, and also European Commissioner for Enlargement, who openly stated that the requests from students on the streets are the same one the EU is asking for Serbia to do. Those are fundamental reforms, fight against corruption, rule of law, and independent judiciary. US practically U.S. ambassador or those from the State Department did not comment at all the students' request. They never supported their claims. So the role of U.S. was to high extent marginalized in this. I remember, I mean, I don't remember, but my parents were talking to me when they were protesting against Milosevic. They had U.S. flags in 90s. and they were even shouting USA, USA. That was usually the way for them to call the US, to call the West, to see what is going on in Serbia, to stop bloody wars, to support democratic changes, to fight again, to support their fight against autocratic regime. In this is totally different context. Serbia is not in the wars. We cannot compare Alexander Vučić with Milosevic in that way. We on the other hand, Serbia is important economic partner for United States. We see the strategic partnership on energy being signed. That's also probably connected with Rio Tinto mining projects in Western Serbia. I'm not sure that the US will be pleased to see China having its footprint on Serbia's minerals, lithium, and others. China already did with the coal industry in Serbia, with steel industry, when US Steel decided to leave Serbia's market after world economic crisis happened. So yeah, that's maybe I didn't answer your question, but I add a few more points. When it comes to Trump's administration, definitely Trump is perceived as a good guy in Serbian society because of his critiques towards even NATO, but also some liberal tendencies that are happening in the West and that are perceived as something that is also imposed to Serbia's society. So yeah, generally Trump is perceived as a good guy. But it's usually not directly connected with US. Like Trump will come and then he will leave, but the stances towards the US will remain like they are now.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, Sava. I would like to now hand the floor to, there's no floor, but hand the microphone to Voje. What is the perspective from Croatia on transatlantic relations in this European world in which we live? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. First of all, I would just like to apologize if there is some background noise in my communication. We have some construction works here going on, which I couldn't anticipate. So sorry for that.
Hey, Voje, and this is like the European Union, huh? It's always under construction. Don't worry.
Yes. So I would like to focus on some aspects which are important for the relationship between Croatia and the United States, which I touched upon in my contribution to the book, which we are all collaborating on. So first, I started there from a look at the recent history, which I think is very important. I think Daniela and other presenters mentioned it, that the US role in the region was crucial in the 1990s when the US successfully brokered the Dayton Peace Accord in 1995, which brought an end to the hostilities in the region. And ever since that period, Croatia is strongly aligned with the United States. That goes for both the left-wing parties and governments, as for the right-wing parties and governments. Is a constancy that we can see ever since the 1990s. And basically, this strong partnership has even been proclaimed by the United States in the second half of the 90s, when they actually claimed that Croatia is the US's most important strategic ally in the region. This partnership is best visible in the area of security, where Croatia became the NATO member state in 2009. And since then, it was quite active in this association. It participated in the missions which were in Afghanistan, Libya, and on Kosovo. And the United States Defense Department, it invested some $800 million into training and equipment of Croatian army in the realm of NATO. Recently, this cooperation in terms of security has received maybe some more positive environment, as we heard from the contribution of our panelists from North Macedonia. In Croatia, also the funds for the defense have been increased. Now it is 2% of the GDP, which is spending on defense, with the projection that by 2030 it's going to be 3%. So this money is used for the purchase of the Western countries' military equipment, and also for the reforms of the Croatian army. When it comes to the foreign policy, this is an interesting area to look at, which tells a lot about this relationship between Croatia and the United States, because what is noticeable is that when in the international conflicts where the European Union doesn't have a united stance, Croatia tends to side with the US. And even when majority of, for example, if you look at the positions in the United Nations on the Middle East, that is very much noticeable. There, Croatia repeatedly takes a position of the United States, regardless of who is in the office, Trump or the Democrats. And regardless of the fact that perhaps even the majority of the EU member states are on a different side. So Croatia sides with the United States, sides with Israel overwhelmingly. And this position shows that perhaps it is that maybe there should be some rethinking of those positions, because there is no clear argumentation why we are so strongly allied with Israel as opposed to the Palestinians. And there's been some criticism in the country internally from the opposition parties of why this is so, and there was no I would say a good explanation on the part of our government, but it just seems to be a policy which is just, it has a deep roots and goes back from the time of Croatia's independence, I would say. Economic relations are also interesting to look. I think similar as our other panelists have said, there is much room for improvement, because the economic cooperation is not that big in volume. So there is about 1.5 billion of exported goods between Croatia and the United States on the annual basis. Most of these exports are from Croatia to the US. Croatia mostly exports pharmaceuticals and weapons to the US, while the United States' biggest export to Croatia is liquefied natural gas and other petroleum gases. There is much room for improving this relationship in economic terms, because, for example, if you look at the total value of Croatian export, then this export to the United States is less than 1%. So it shows that there is really a lot of space for making Croatia more friendly to the American businesses, making Croatian businesses better aware of the possibilities to invest in the U.S. market, and this there is ample possibilities in this regard. One area which must be stressed, and which is, I think, very, very important in recent years, is energy and energy cooperation. Croatia has opened its LNG, liquefied natural gas terminal on the island of Krk. This is in northern Adriatic in 2021. And since then, there is about 2.9 billion cubic meters of liquefied gas, which is being trafficked through these LNG terminal on the annual basis. The projections are that the capacity of the terminal will be more than doubled in a few years. And this really helped a lot in diversification of energy in reducing the reliance on the Russian gas, not only for Croatia, but also for the neighboring countries. And I think also it is important to say that, when you look at Croatia from a geographic perspective, because of its long coastline, because of a lot of wind and sun power in this Mediterranean area, there is a lot of potential for investment in the clean green energy, which is something that should be perhaps better advocated and presented to the US businesses as a business opportunity and as a development of a clean energy sector, which is still quite underdeveloped in Croatia. So, I mean, to sum up, not to be too long, I would just say that definitely this strong alliance with the EU, United States, has ample possibilities of being even more strongly enlarged and in terms of economic relationship, which is underdeveloped and which is I think which has a lot of possibilities in this area. However, I think Croatia, as a small country, should really coordinate its positions with the European Union. I think this having a unique stance, contrary to the other EU countries, could be to the detriment of Croatia. We need to develop this relationship, but we need to coordinate also with other countries. I think that's a broader European issue, that we need to have more united stance toward the United States and not to try to broker deals individually, because that weakens the European Union. And in terms of what did I want to say? And in terms of the foreign policy, definitely, I think Croatia should rethink its current blind following of the US foreign policy, particularly not so much in terms of Ukraine, where Croatia is, for the most part, very strongly supporting Ukraine, but this comes to the area of the Middle East, where it should really find a more balanced approach to the region and become and obtain more principled positions, which is currently not the case. That would be the conclusion of my contribution to the book, and I'm open now for the questions. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Roger. Also, very interesting point of views, I would like to say, and I have follow-up questions for you too, which I thought about when I was listening to you. But there's also there are also coming in some questions on the Q&A button. I will look at them in a moment. But for the follow-up, Roger, you have mentioned the importance of Croatia being an energy hub and the potential for clean, green energy. That is probably something that Croatia should discuss more on a state level in the US and not so much with the federal level, because from what we are reading, the Trump administration is not really fond about green energy at this point in time. But if there's a business case and if there's potential, they might be convinced. But at state level is always an option. Now, on strategic infrastructure, because you have talked about energy, I remember the discussion on this bridge built by the Chinese to connect the mainland with Dubrovnik. Have the views changed on strategic infrastructure also in the context of this very important role as an energy hub? That would be my first question. Second question, what about public opinion of Croats regarding the US? Is this all, does this reflect the political alignment of Croatia with the US, or is public opinion actually more critical?
Okay, so about the strategic infrastructure, you asking me about the bridge on the Pelješac bridge, which was recently, which was actually implemented some years ago. The Chinese were the principal investors in that project. It was a huge project, one of the biggest bridges of this kind in Europe. And at the time, there was a lot of actually questioning why are the Chinese building the bridge when China is not a strategic partner, but the United States is a strategic partner. There was a lot of questioning about how this deal was made, but there were no answers from the side of our government. So I think what they said that it is that they were the best bidders, how to say, and that's how they got this contract. But if such huge projects would be done today, I'm not sure how this really would end up. But I think that certainly in strategic infrastructure like the LNG terminal on Kirk and the similar, there is a lot of Western European countries which are involved in these investments, and so these investments are hugely supported from the EU funds. Without the EU funds, it is questionable to actually see how any of this would happen, because about 80% of all infrastructure is now being co-financed by from the European funds. And so because Croatia is still below the EU average and it's net recipient of these funds, people are now starting to ask questions what the future will bring, because in the future, more likely, we are not going to be able to extract so much from the European Union. So how will we then do our infrastructure when this money is not going to be available anymore? So I think economists are even now posing this question, and this is where the relationship with the United States and this economic cooperation comes to the fore, because we are not going to be able to maintain this model which we right now have. On the term of public opinion, unlike in Serbia and Croatia, people are strongly pro the United States, but they are viewing the United States as really a strong partner and crucial in ending the war in the 1990s, the US support. So I don't think there is any discrepancy, but these opinions are always kind of generic. They don't go so much into details. Nobody's questioning, the economic cooperation and development. But for example, when it comes to Ukraine, then you could perhaps say that there is some hesitance, because the US position is a full-fledged support for Ukraine, and in Croatia, this support is there are some reservations, which could be seen in maybe the stance of our president Zoran Milanovic, who is the democratically elected president and who has a more reserved positions. He supports the Ukrainians and is in favor of the economic support, but he's very cautious when it comes to military cooperation and involvement in the military involvement of Croatia in this conflict. And I think the public opinion in Croatia follows this line greatly. I apologize for the noise. I hope that you were able to hear me. Yeah.
No, Voye, we were all waiting for the noise, but there was no noise. So
I'm hearing it.
now we heard you perfectly well, or at least I did. Now, there is a question in the Q&A chat from Akush Parna, maybe to Daniela and Irena in that order, whether you also perceive a change in pro-US relations. How big is the group in your countries that are critical to US views and politics? And is this group growing or is this getting smaller? Daniela, would you like to start?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. Very intriguing question right now. I don't have any data, and I don't think that we do any surveys for public opinion about pro-US or no. Now we are more oriented about the EU. But Montenegrin expertise is the experience is that Montenegro is very related to United States. During all this period, no matter Republicans, liberals, Democrats, Montenegro has experienced huge support of the US. I will say that right now the US is the strongest supporter of the Montenegro's enlargement. And in addition to that, we have a confirmation from former Trump's second-term policy that Montenegro got only 10% of tariffs compared. So we are in the group with Albania of the countries all over the globe with the smallest or the lowest tariffs. So I don't see personally, I can't share with you any public or official data, but we have very, as I mentioned, even Republicans, even the Democrats did all the job related to NATO. It was the Trump administration who sent the highest US officials to Montenegro for first time ever. So I would say that we have very long and strong relation with the US. We, of course, looking forward and looking only to the EU. But as I said, history and unfortunate experience of 90s has learned us to balance cooperation with all the partners. And that's, I think, how it is official policy and how is public opinion in Montenegro. I hope that I answered, but if you have some more question, or I will be happy to answer.
Thank you, Daniela. Irena.
Okay, as I understood, the question is related to anti-American or anti-Trump. I didn't get that.
Well, it says pro-US relations. Is there support for change in pro-US relations? Is there support for anti-US relations? Is it growing? Is it small? That's the way I understood the question.
Okay. Well, I would love to make that distinction. I mean, one is pro-American and the other, for me, is pro-Trump. There are no strong or viable voices that are anti-American apart from, I don't know, a couple or maybe three political parties which are not parliamentary represented who are clearly pro-Russian but not that influential. There is a political party that is presented in the parliament which has a clearly pro-Russian, anti-Western, and anti-NATO stance, but I don't see them pointing out lately, apart from the fact when we have elections and now we have upcoming local elections when everything is fired up, so all the weapons are used and every argument is viable. On the other hand, being anti-Trump is maybe more related to ideological views, and I haven't seen any polls lately pointing out that there are voices raging against Trump, apart from voices coming out from the leftist camp. So that would be.
Yeah, Irina, I would have a last question to you and to Daniela and to Sava as well. I would be interested to know your views on whether the United States has an impact on EU enlargement, or whether this is just wishful thinking, and with everything going on around the world, the current administration is not really interested in what is happening in the region.
Okay.
Irena, you want to start?
Okay, well, in essence, the reality of international relations has changed after Trump's second term. So within this reality, the US has clearly stated that European problems should be solved within that realm. And therefore, we should not expect anything significant or major to come from, in terms of American backing and American support, in terms of Trump influencing our EU integration or solving what is imminent, our regional and bilateral issues, at least at present. This doesn't mean that we should abandon or forsake our good bilateral relations with the US, or that we should side fully with them like we did on several instances in 2005, because this changeable stance of international politics and all the uncertainties that it may bring will at some point display that the EU and US are not actually on the same side and have diverging views or have different stands on issues that are important for us. What we should probably do is make best of the situation by balancing out on what is possible and what is necessary, as well as what is expected from us and what we can actually accomplish. The current government has stated many times that it is open for resolution of current stalemate regarding EU integration, but it remains firm on not taking any steps further that may compromise our identity. Now, what the US may do in such a situation, I really cannot answer. It depends on many things within that context. But relying on strategic partnership and having them there as a backing is really, really important, and I believe imperative.
Thank you. A very quick reply also from you, Daniela, and then Sava.
Very short. Let's enlarge Western Balkan in the EU, and then we don't need to have separate views, EU, Western Balkans, and the US. That's from Podgorica. Bye.
Yes, from Belgrade, Sava.
Yeah, I would like just to highlight the fact that there is no former socialist country from Eastern Europe that joined the EU without previously establishing strategic partnership with the US, usually by joining the NATO. That was the fact. That is the fact. That is a historical experience, and I don't see Serbia joining the EU without having maybe not formal membership to NATO, but without having a strategic partnership with the USA. Enlargement EU accession process, on the other hand, is different than having strategic partnership with one major power, because you need to conduct reforms. You need to align with EU acquis and EU common foreign and security policy as well. And on that note, that can be sometimes problematic when it comes to Trump's administration and some divergent views on certain issues. For instance, what if Trump persuaded Putin to sign some kind of agreement that were not negotiated and aligned with EU positions? What then Western Balkan countries which are candidates to the EU would do? will they choose to follow US position or EU's position? That's why it's very important for transatlantic partners to speak with one voice, and I think that highly reflects on our region.
Boye, would you come in here for a quick statement also on how you see the impact and interest of the US in the transformation and enlargement process of the region?
Yeah, I think it is of crucial importance. As demonstrated in the 1990s, there was no solution without America coming in and actually brokering it. So it is of crucial importance, but this strategic partnership needs to be filled with additional content, and this first and foremost means better conditions for economic cooperation, which is underdeveloped in the whole of the region, I would say.
Well, on this note, what can I say? Thank you very, very much, Irena, Daniela, Roye, and Sava for joining us here today. They're not only speakers today, but they're also authors in this beautiful book, The United States and the Future of Europe, Views from the Capitals. It's a living document. It's dynamic. You see, there's so many things going on, but it gives you a good sense on where our countries are coming from in transatlantic relations and what it has to do with European integration. And in fact, we're already working on the next book, which will be on security, defense, and the future of Europe, views from the capitals. And I think it connects very well with this current book on the transatlantic relations. Can I also thank Allegra from TEPSA, the Trans-European Policy Studies Association, for helping us coordinate and organize today's event. And having said this, thank you all very much. Keep in touch and have a good day. Bye.